Hi, my name's Anna and I'm doing a talk on viral growth in highly regulated industries. So just a bit about myself. My name's Anna, like I mentioned before. I currently work in growth at Spaceship. So my first 4 months in my role, I helped Spaceship's superannuation product get $100 million in funds under management and 40,000 people on their wait list. And this let Spaceship raise money off some of the world's most prestigious investors, including NEA, Sequoia Capital, Valar Ventures, and Horizon. Now we've also released a second product called Spaceship Voyager, which is now 6th in the Apple App Store in the finance category, which we're really proud of. It was launched in the early May this year, so it's currently got thousands of members. I've also previously worked as a growth marketing instructor at Academy XI, and I've also done some freelancing for companies like KPMG High Growth Ventures. Also, during my role at Spaceship, I also did work in a compliance and legal role, which is why I'm going to be sort of talking about the mix between growth and the regulatory stance in the fintech sector. So for those of you who don't know what Spaceship is a financial services company that helps millennials generate wealth over their careers. So the first product we launched was our superannuation product, and we had 2 portfolios. So we had the Growth X portfolio and the Global Index portfolio. Our main value proposition was that it allowed a lot of consumers to invest in the technology industry and in the global market, which they didn't have as much exposure to before. And the investment ethos was to invest in where the world is going. Our most recent product is called Voyager, and it's a managed investment scheme, and it's an app that you can download onto your phone. There's 2 portfolios, the Spaceship Index portfolio and the Spaceship Universe portfolio. Similar idea, one is the Universe portfolio is hand-picked stocks that our portfolio managers put together, and the index portfolio follows the world's top 200 companies. It's free for the first $5,000 invested, and then depending on the portfolio, you choose 0.05 to 0.1% for balances above that, and there's no minimum investment. So I actually added to this slide afterwards, but I realized I didn't update it in this version. But the context in which financial services companies work in is a lot different to a lot of startups. So when I first started learning about growth, there were so many interesting things, so many great tactics and like sneaky tactics as well, similar to, you know, how Airbnb sort of went through Craigslist to get their first couple of orders, and all these sneaky things that sounded like really cool ideas that I realized entering the financial services industry you can't actually do. So it's actually highly regulated by ASIC, and they've got a guideline called RG234, which basically sets out what you can and can't do in terms of advertising for financial services and products. But actually, most importantly, what I realized as a major constraint working in financial services as a growth person is actually how you set up your governance structure initially. So for a lot of startups who want to enter financial services, it might actually have quite a high capital level that you need in order to enter the market. So for superannuation, this is specifically true. So we actually started off our product as a promoter of the trustee of the fund, which meant that everything we needed to do had to go through external approval before it can be put through and published, which made the iteration process for experiments and for stuff really long and really difficult to do. But I'll talk more about that a bit later. So I know you've probably heard a lot today, but I'm probably going to tell all my learnings as a story. So this is me, and that's Paul, where the arrow is pointing to him. And Paul actually found me when I did my first talk for Growth Hackers Australia back in 2016. And he organised a coffee meeting with me through Dan, and he spelt Dan's name wrong and wrote Dan Sapien. And was like, oh yeah, Dan Sapien referred to you. Let's grab a coffee. And I ignored his email probably for 2 weeks because I was like, oh, this is like just a creepy guy who wants coffee. And then turns out, you know, he was an investor, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should go meet up with him. And so I met him up for coffee. He's like, yeah, I'm doing this project called Spaceship. And then he basically tried to hire me on the spot. And I spent that entire interview telling him I wasn't as good as he thought I was. And I actually didn't know that much about growth, and totally winged that presentation, and like, don't expect too much from me. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I get it's a learning process. And he's like, so do you think you can get me $100 million by the end of March? And I was sort of like, probably not, but I was like, I'll give it my best shot, sort of thing. And I was like, I'll see whether or not, it'll happen. And then I think I was just very lucky that I came in with like very open mind and a blank slate that eventually actually did happen over the 4 months. So when I was sort of presented with that problem, I went into it and I was like, okay, so what are the most essential truths? So just working off first principles, what do I know is true? And then how can I just sort of experiment and find out how to grow like no other company's grown before in 4 months? So the first thing I did was I was like, okay, so who am I pitching to? So I need a website, I need a landing page. What's the target market? So the first thing I did in my first week at Spaceship was actually call up 200 people on our wait list, the top referrers, so the low-hanging fruit of our customers, and just run through this HubSpot customer persona survey. And this survey is actually really good because everything that you learn from your customer here, you can actually apply through your ads and through your landing page copy, which is exactly what I did. So just very quickly, these are the sort of data that you could actually just find probably from Google Analytics without trying. So what you really want to do is you want to humanize the person that you're going to be feeding the copy on your landing page to, and the copy that you're going to put through your ads. And the reason you want to do this is because usually when you communicate to your customer, you're coming in with a lot of background knowledge and a lot of jargon that they might not understand. So what you really want to do is you want to use the customer's language and you want to feed it back to them. So that's the main reason that I did this. So you want to sort of build up a background persona. So this one's not too important, but it's just more like, okay, well, male, female, what's the age range, maybe household income, what buzzwords do they use? So for us, innovation was a big buzzword that a lot of people sort of related to. But this is probably more important. So finding out their goals. So for me, when I was asking them this question, I was like, okay, well, what are your goals with superannuation? And some people would say returns. Some people would say, oh, I just want transparency. I want to know what's going on. Some people might be like, okay, well, I want to build a better world. So I'm looking at ethical investing or something like that. And everyone's got different responses, but it's really important to sort of cluster up the similar responses and sort of keep the data somewhere. The challenges, you might want to ask something like, so what are the current hardships that you're having with your current superannuation fund? And they might tell us things like, I don't know where my superannuation is invested. I don't even know which super funds I have. I don't know where my money is going. I don't know how much I'm being charged. And maybe the overarching cluster issue is with transparency, and you want to sort of write that down as well, and how we help. So why did you choose Spaceship? And this is where they pretty much tell you what they think your value proposition is. So they'll reiterate, okay, well, I'm joining Spaceship because I think you're investing in the future, and I want my money to be invested in more tech companies than, say, mining or BHP or something like that. And then you might want to drop that down as well. And the most important question I find, which is what I put on the hero of the landing page, was how would you describe Spaceship to a friend? And this is a really good question because especially when you're interviewing your target market, they can tell you exactly what they think your product is in their own words, and that's probably the words that would resonate the most with your target audience. It's like their own language. So I could explain, it's like when you're trying to sell yourself or like tells your background to someone else, and usually someone else can probably brag about you a lot better than you can. It's sort of like that idea where it's like by using their own language, it's a lot easier to sell. And what the most common words and the most common keywords I found from this answer was exactly what I put onto the landing page on the first iteration of the Spaceship website. And you also want to find the common objections, so you can also address that on your website as well. So the responses to all these questions, which I gathered up in a pretty jank Excel spreadsheet and sort of just clustered together. I actually ended up putting them all on the landing page. So the landing page would address all the goals of my target audience, the challenges they're facing with their current superannuation fund. I'll try to address reasons why they wouldn't join Spaceship, and also most importantly on my hero, which is the biggest writing and the first thing you see, how they would have described Spaceship. And then so once I'd found my target customer and I've figured out the language that they're using, the next thing was, okay, well, so how to get the 100 million? What sort of acquisition tactics will I be using in order to get to that 100 million? And this is a really good framework for it. So this is not, so I didn't go through this list when I was I didn't experiment with every single channel, but what I did was I chose 2 to 3 channels that I felt like would resonate in this particular industry and in the B2C sort of category. So some of these might work better for B2B. So for example, conferences and events tend to work better for B2B than B2C. And similarly, like ads would work a lot better for B2C than B2B. So it really depends on your industry, your business model, and what you're trying to do. But I would always refer back to this 19 Channels of Traction, which comes from a book called Traction. And you can always use that as like a starting guide for when you're sort of out of ideas on what you want to experiment with next. So I'm going to go through one of the examples, which is probably one of our most popular ones in attributing to the 100 mil that we got, which was virality. So I love talking about virality because everyone sort of wants to get into virality. No one really gets it, or like it's a really hard thing to do. But there are actually so many manifestations of virality that have already existed that you might not have noticed. So word of mouth is the one we all know. So, you know, if I tell a friend about your service, then that's word of mouth virality and it just goes around. Inherent virality is when the user value increases when their friends sign up. So LinkedIn is my favorite example of this because LinkedIn sort of got like a double loop virality where my experience of LinkedIn would improve if my colleagues were on LinkedIn so I could see what they're up to. But the moment I add an extra connection on LinkedIn, it actually reactivates inactive users. So if I was a LinkedIn member, but I wasn't really active, but I got an email to say that, hey, my boss added me as a connection, I would jump back on LinkedIn just to accept that friend request. And that's called inherent virality, where your experience actually improves by referring other people onwards. Collaboration is products where, you know, having other users on them might help you improve your experience of the product. So stuff like Trello, where, you know, if you're working on a group project, it's a lot better to have your colleagues on it as well. Communication tools, similarly like Slack. So Slack, obviously a lot better if you refer your colleagues to use Slack with you. Incentives, so your Airbnbs, your Ubers, where you're paying people to join. And embedding is actually a super underrated one that YouTube has actually done extremely well. So it's when you see, say, on Blogspot, or when you see even on Facebook, the YouTube app itself is actually embedded, so it autoplays. You know, you can add it to your website super easy, and basically everyone knows it's YouTube and can click in and keep watching videos. So YouTube's great with the embedding virality. The one we actually used to get our initial traction was, well, at this point in time, I was pretty much selling thin air. So I needed to get to 100 mil, but we hadn't launched a product yet. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty difficult. So what I actually did was I built a wait list just because we didn't have a product in market yet. I couldn't get them to start rolling over either. So what I did was I built a wait list. So this was on our landing page. So I just asked for the email address, and if you'd hit enter, then you would have gotten to this page. You're currently in group 36 of the waitlist. So I was like, oh yeah, why not gamify it a bit? So you're in group 36 of the waitlist, which didn't actually mean that much, but you were in group 36, and I said, if you complete your profile, we'll move you up 10 groups. So we actually had a 66% conversion rate on the completion rate on this form, which is a really great completion rate for mobile verification. And then once you'd completed the mobile verification stage, you were moved up to group 26, which most people were. And then for every person you'd referred onwards, we would move you up 5 groups. So basically, if you'd referred 5 friends to join our wait list, you would be in group 1. So we actually had a lot of people. I think someone referred 300 and something people. That was our top referrer. And it was sort of like, that was what got it going. It was people who were posting on Twitter and stuff like that about Spaceship. We also had these 3 examples of tweets that people would post about us as social proof, and because some people are like, oh, I don't really feel comfortable sharing a financial product with my friends yet, but then this was more like, oh, it's okay, other people are doing it, and this is a messaging that you could copy if you were out of ideas. So that helped as well, and also the easy share links. So I get asked this question a lot, so I'll just address it now. We built this in-house, but you can actually use a pre-made solution called Matra app. I don't know if I pronounce it wrong because everyone asks me afterwards, but it's M-A-I-T-R-E app, and they've pretty much got like a pre-built solution that you can just add to your website. So after all of that, we send them an email to remind them of their referral link so that they always had access to it. So a main takeaway on referrals after running this campaign is that I would only really use an incentivized referral, so anything that, say, involves money or credit or something like that. If you really need to hit critical mass, so if you have a product like PayPal and you really need that crowd effect for your product to work, then that's the only reason why I would use an incentive in the early stage. Otherwise, if I were you, I would try to use an incentive that helps improve other people's experience of your product. So Dropbox does this really well. If I refer you to Dropbox, you get 500 megabytes and I get 500 megabytes. Because you get 500 megabytes, you're likely to join Dropbox, and because I get 500 megabytes, I'm more likely to retain as a user, and that improves Dropbox's retention rate as well. So it's actually like feeds into both retention and also acquisition. So always try to look for something that would improve the user's experience. And also just do your general cost-benefit analysis. So, there's diminishing returns at a large scale. So at one point when your product's a great product, so for example, PayPal, you would realize that people would be joining organically anyway, and you don't actually want to be paying for those organic referrals, people who would have joined for free. So you would be increasing your cost per acquisition if you had paid that referral fee. And the other part is just make sure your cost per acquisition doesn't exceed the customer lifetime value. So for example, if you're selling like an item for $2, you don't want to be paying $5 for every customer that joins. But obviously we can't attribute everything to the referral system. While it worked really well for us, we did have a lot of campaigns that helped drive traffic towards the site to sort of run that referral system. So our most popular ad campaign was the Mike Cannon-Brookes campaign, and the reason I ran that was because superannuation's a high-end product, so it's like over the span of 1 year, you'll be paying hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on your balance. A lot of it had to do with building trust, and what I was thinking of was, what does my customer or my target audience, who do they look up to, who are their peers? So when it came to who they looked up to, I looked at the tech CEO. So that's the CEO of Atlassian, and he was featured on our ads. And then I also ran stuff like Astronauts of the Day, which I don't do anymore, unfortunately. But I superimpose someone's face on on a planet, and I posted that on Twitter, and that was just to get into their peer networks, because everyone would retweet if their face was on a planet and posted by a company. So that got into people spreading it across their own networks, so that would sort of build trust within peers. And then there was also other stuff, like we had the audacity to sell our merch. So we didn't just give it away, we actually sold it on our website for like $20. But we also gave it for free for people who joined early. We had a blog, we won a lot of awards, and we had a lot of tech influencers speak at our events. But unfortunately, because we weren't equipped with the knowledge that we now know, we had a lot of roadblocks as well, and a lot of that had to do with the governance structure. But it's sort of something that was difficult to avoid as well. So working under a trustee as a promoter meant that a lot of the experiments I wanted to run, or like if I needed to make an iteration to something that already existed, meant it had to go through an approval process through the trustee again, which actually added a lot to the timeline and actually slowed down this entire sort of cycle of learning. So the idea of this cycle is, so you come up with a hypothesis or an idea. So for example, this value proposition works better than the other value proposition. Then you build an MVP. So maybe I'll run an A/B split test on my website to test value prop A versus value prop B. I'll look at the data, and then I'll sort of come up with my next hypothesis. So if value prop A worked better, maybe I'll try it with a different image in the back and see which one converts better, for example. But every iteration of that, working under a trustee meant that every iteration needed approval, which always lengthened the timeline. So when we actually launched our second product, which is called Voyager, we launched it with our own AFSL. So we were also our own responsible entity, our own investment manager, and our own administrator. So we did everything in-house, which meant we had full control over the product. And that actually gave us a lot of scope to do what we wanted to do and to iterate a lot faster. But then when we got to that stage, we were also at a stage where it was no longer that team of 5 of us in the office going to drinks every single day, knowing it was unhealthy for us. But it was actually like a team of 30 now. And then it's so easy when you're a team of 30 to sort of lose track of what the overall company vision is, to easily just outgrow your own growth team and be like, okay, well, this is just the growth team, here's the engineering team, let's keep growing those teams separately. And it's just so easy to get that mixed up. And I feel like it's really important at this stage to sort of have a real think about how you want your team to be like. So this is the difference between marketing and growth, and this is the difference between larger organizations and the sort of growth team that you really want. So when I was in university, the marketing that they taught me was very similar to this traditional model here, where I learned about awareness and acquisition. And this is very obvious when you see this in organizations, because their team structure and also their KPIs were all aligned to just these two parts of the funnel. So what I mean by this is your team will probably be made up of copywriters, digital advertisers, maybe SEO specialists or something like that. And also your KPIs would be something like, you know, app downloads per day. Oh, no, sorry, just app downloads or leads or users or something like that, which when you draw it out on a graph, it's actually just always going to increase linearly. Is that how you say it? It's going to be a linear increase in graph. Whereas if you take a look at the growth, the way growth does, just to continue, what's missing from the traditional model is you don't see your designers, you don't see your engineers and your product managers all in the same place. They're basically siloed out into different divisions. Whereas when you're looking at growth, you get a much more holistic view of your business. So the growth people focus on the growth rate, but the growth rate is actually affected by every single piece of that funnel. So where, you know, usually in the traditional model, you'd have your product managers working on activation, retention, and your salespeople working on revenue. All those people fit within that same pod in a growth team. And then that changes the entire way they view their KPIs as well. So the main things growth teams do is they look at how each part of that funnel interacts with each other and where's the drop-off point. And once they find the drop-off point, that's what the team is going to be working on to make sure that that funnel is not a funnel but a tunnel sort of idea. So I'll go into activation later. Revenue is just basically your annual recurring revenue or monthly recurring revenue or whatever that target for you is. And that's obviously affected by the top parts of the funnel. So how many people you reach out to who are aware of your brand, and then how many of those convert, and then how many of those end up buying or being upsold or something like that. And then that's what ultimately determines your revenue. So once you've built the right team, which it consists of, you know, your product managers, your designers, your growth people, and your engineers, then you can use that team to focus on a product. So I've always said, you know, you can't really sprinkle growth on top of a product as an afterthought. Product should always be used as the vehicle for your growth. So like I mentioned earlier, activation is actually the most important metric in any business, and this is just mathematically true. So activation takes place when the user first achieves the value you promise. So when they first realize the benefit of your product. So for us, it's when they rolled over their super, or for our Voyager product, it was when they first invested their first dollar. And an example of how, you know, having ownership over our entire product by having the right licenses helped this was we currently with Voyager, we have no minimum investment, which means that a user can roll over 5 cents if they want. can invest 5 cents if they want into the Voyager product. So they would actually get a feel of the product, having invested like a very small amount, and if they liked it, then they could continue on with the product, which actually helps a lot with the activation stage, because what we really want them to do is actually just see the benefit of the product and how your investment might rise or fall over time. So activation is measured as a percentage of activated users out of acquired users. And it impacts not only revenue, but also recurring revenue from your existing users. So if you look at it mathematically, if you increased activation by 25%, you would actually get a 48.6% increase in annual recurring revenue. When you compare this to the other parts of the funnel, so for example, acquisition, which is pretty boring, if you increase acquisition by 25%, it's going to be a linear increase to your revenue. If you increase activation, because it affects retention rate, it's a 48.6%, which is the highest out of all of them. Revenue, obviously, if you increase revenue, it's going to linear. I'm going to stop saying that word. But it's going to be the same increase to your revenue. And retention is also another good one. And surprisingly, referrals are a low one, but a lot of people want to focus on it. And usually that's because referrals are pretty cheap to get. So when it comes to activating investors, what you really want to think about is your onboarding journey and how the user's going to get to your products. So for us, for the Voyager product especially, our activation metric is is investing that first dollar. So even from the stage of the App Store, ratings and reviews are really important because it provides social proof. You want to feel secure that other people are investing in this product as well. And that's the reason why we actually stress a lot on reviews on Google, on your app, on Facebook, because that's that's what people check when they want to feel like the product is trustworthy. We use Mixpanel, but we've integrated Segment with Mixpanel in order to generate this. So Segment basically is like a data warehouse, and it will capture the particular actions of the onboarding journey and feed into Mixpanel, which makes it a pretty graph. So what you can see with this graph is you can see there's 2 main drop-off points. So this is, I just grabbed off Google, but 2 main drop-off points. So there's one that's 78.57% and the 66.67% drop. So you're actually losing customers at every stage, and what you really want to do is you want to figure out why they're dropping off at that stage. So for our superannuation product, for example, a lot of people dropped off at the TFN stage because no one knows where it is in general. I still don't know where it is. And what we actually did to improve to lower the drop-off rate by 20% is actually we just included like a little bubble to say, hey, you can call the ATO to get your TFN, or you can check your latest pay slip. And then people knew where to look to get their TFN, and they were less likely to drop off at that stage. Another way you can address drop-offs is if you just if you send like trigger emails based on certain events. So for example, if you can see that someone has dropped off at so for example, for me, I was just doing this with a test account, but they couldn't verify me because I'd made a fake account. But so I would have dropped off at that stage and said, this person couldn't be verified. So we just followed up that immediately with an email to say, hey, all you have to do is this to follow up, and then you can continue your sign-on process. I left the rest for questions. So does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Oh, is there like a box thing that they want us to use? Okay. Yeah.
It's probably a specific question. So you said your highest referral was 300. Do you know what the average was?
Oh, I think everyone who referred around 3 people, and then I can't remember how many people referred overall. It might have been like 1 in 6 or something like that, but I don't remember. I remember 3 being like the amount of people that an average referral would roll over. Would refer. Sorry. Yep. Oh.
How long did you keep people on your wait list? How long can you keep people on the wait list?
We actually did like a staggered launch. So the reason we did that was because we wanted to get bugs out obviously we wanted to figure out what the bugs were. So we did friends and family launch first, and then we did top 50 referrers, and then we went, maybe top 100, top 200, and that was because we were fixing up bugs as we went along I think the last lot was probably in February, but we'd started the referral system in around, we started the waitlist in November, so it was like maybe 3 months. But there are companies that have done it for a very long time. Like I'm still on Robinhood's waiting list, and it's been like 2 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Some of your favorite learning resources, like you mentioned, results and traction. Do you have other favorites?
There was, I don't remember what the website it was on, but there's actually there's like these case studies of like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and how they'd actually grown their company. And I found that learning from them was actually probably the most useful resource. I don't remember what I Googled, but maybe if you looked up like Twitter case studies or like LinkedIn case studies of growth, it might come up. But that was really useful. And then I remember I got started by attending a lot of these growth talks. So I probably attended like a dozen or two growth talks when I first started out, and I didn't know what I was listening to, and I just like scribbled everything down and had spelling errors everywhere. But over time, it like eventually stuck. So I think growth like talks help, and that helps as well. And if you haven't read The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, then read that as well. Yeah. Do we have time? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that one's always been like a bit difficult. So if you could get any sort of expression of interest, and I don't mean like through friends and family, because that's like a bit of a participation bias, but just trying to like do some way to sort of generate interest and get people who are actually interested in your product to express interest, and then doing a survey on those people, I think that would help the persona. A lot of the times it is sort of like guess and check at the beginning. A technique is like maybe you can even just walk up to someone on the street or like someone who fits your persona and then sort of ask them questions. Like that works as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when you start off, how do you, I guess, allocate a budget, time and resources?
Yeah, so it really depends on which channel. So when we started off our team, I was very lucky because our team, we had someone who was good at writing content, so he wrote all the content, so I didn't have to write blogs. And then the other person was doing outreach, which was our other channel, and so he organized all the events and stuff, and then I did most of the digital stuff. And we were very lucky that we just had those people there and we didn't have to spend extra on it. But then the amount of money, I guess, you spend on each of those channels really depends on what channel it is. So for example, ads, for example, is like a great way to boost your business initially when you have no one. And some people, and like a lot of startups are like, oh yuck, ads, like oh yuck, money like spent on advertising. But it's actually a great way to get that initial traffic to your website and to validate whether or not your value proposition is real, or to validate if anything works. So ads is actually like a great way to sort of get that initial jump that you need. But then there's stuff like, say, like SEO that or like ad SEO, which you probably wouldn't be spending an exorbitant amount of money on, which is just more like, oh, this will actually just grow over time. So if you write blogs consistently, it'll grow over time. It just really depends on like what channel you're picking. But you can also sort of rank them based on like performance on like tests you've done.